Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show and happy Monday. The China spy balloon was shot down over the weekend. Finally. Was everybody in your circle talking about this? I mean, everybody I know was talking about I went to my daughter Yardley's soccer game on Saturday. All the parents are sitting there on the sidelines, and it was all we were talking about. People were showing pictures of, what looked like it being shot down in Billings. Remember, there was that one report, and then we got the report late about in the Atlantic Ocean. It's just, I don't know what it is about this story, but everybody's interested in it. It brings up a lot, right? Like, how did they do this? The Chinese are getting bolder. We're getting more feckless. It touches a lot of buttons. President Biden allowed his Department of Defense to wait days to shoot it down. In fact, we're told they overruled him. He's the commander in chief. He issued a direct order, according to him, and they said, "Grandpa, take a seat." That's what he's now saying. That's my editorial in there too. But he's basically saying they said, not till it's over the ocean. So he's blaming them, and they're kind of saying, well, we did what was responsible. Then his administration tried to blame it on Trump, saying Trump did it too. They wanted to deflect and say Trump did it too. And we'll tell you the latest on what Team Trump is saying on that and what our own investigation has shown. Plus, in the news today, the Grammys pushes Satan and BDSM on American children. Oh, that's fun. Joining me now, veteran Navy SEAL and one of the most highly decorated combat veterans of our time, Robert O'Neill. Robert's also the host of the podcast, The Operator. Look, you did the tough thing during COVID. You did the right thing. You paid your people and pulled your business through the nightmare pandemic and all the government restrictions being handed down to you. And now doing the tough thing could qualify you for up to $26,000 per employee at covidtaxrelief.org. You need to know about this. Government funds are available right now to reward companies. Already allocated, this is not like a new tax burden on people. Companies that have 2 or more employees who stayed open during COVID. It's not a loan, and you don't have to pay it back. The program's complicated, but nobody knows more about it than the CPAs and the tax experts at covidtaxrelief.org. covidtaxrelief.org. You pay nothing up front. They do all the work. Then they share a percentage of the cash that they get you. They don't get you anything, you don't pay. Businesses of all types, including nonprofits and churches, can qualify, including those who took PPP loans. If you already took a PPP loan, you could still qualify. Even if you had increases in sales, they are rewarding those employers who kept people on the payroll. You did the tough thing for your employees during COVID. Let covidtaxrelief.org help you get up to $26,000 per employee as a result. Go to covidtaxrelief.org. 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 What have you got to lose? Rob, great to have you back on the show. How are you?
I'm great, Megan. How are you doing? Hey, thanks for having me too. It's always a pleasure to get on here because I think we're going to solve a lot of problems and bring up a bunch of other stuff that people aren't aware of.
Yes, good. It's always a pleasure for me. You're one of my very, very favorite guests. So, and what great timing for us in the wake of all this balloon stuff. So just to set the table, the New York Times reporting per Pentagon officials, the spy balloon was remotely maneuverable to some degree by the Chinese, and that it was first spotted in the United States last Saturday, January 28th, right? That's January 28th. So not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before that. Then, and somebody in Team Biden was briefed on it. And then the president was personally alerted on Tuesday when it was in northern Idaho and asked for military options, according to the New York Times. And then he was told, I guess he claims now that he said, let's shoot it down, but that General Milley and Secretary Austin advised against that while it was over land. Thus, they waited until Saturday when it was over the Atlantic to shoot it down. First of all, what do you make of that alleged chain of events?
Well, I'm sure they spotted it over the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, and I don't think this is the first time that China's ever done this with the balloons. I'm sure we've seen it before, and a lot of times there's really no need to tell the public a lot. I mean, if it's out over the the Pacific, just because if there's nothing you can do about it, there's no need to freak people out. But it wasn't really until it got over Montana that I think some private pilots spotted it, and they reported and it went up to NORAD. And eventually people had it. But my father took a picture of it from his hot tub. And my brother, who's got his own morning show in Butte, Montana, said, hey, he helps me with some of my podcast ideas and gives me some links. He says, hey, there's this weird balloon over Montana. Here's the link in case you don't hear about it. I was like, oh, we're going to hear about it. We're definitely going to hear about it. It's just a matter of when. And then, they could have done something about it there. Shooting it down it is provocative, but so is flying in our airspace. You remember what they did with our P-3 Orion a few years back when they brought it down with fighter jet escorts and reverse engineer it like they do. I mean, I don't know why they need to do that when they can just send their spies that are at NYU to steal all of our stuff like they do anyway. But for the president,
call Hunter.
Yeah. But for the president to say, yeah, I wanted to shoot it down, but then they told me I couldn't. He kind of said the quiet part out loud that he's admitting he's not in charge. The Pentagon does not overrule the commander in chief. I'm not sure if everyone knows how the chain of command works, but if he says shoot it down, shoot it down. And that's how it works. General Milley doesn't have a say, and he can be an advisor, which he is. But they said no, and he agreed because he just does what he's told.
Plus, don't you, Rob, I mean, I admittedly know nothing about this, but there's a lot of open prairie in America. There's a lot of open space in Montana in particular. They're like, oh, well, it wasn't safe to shoot it down when, there are people on the ground. Like, as if every square inch of the United States is populated in the way that Manhattan is.
Yeah, it's just something they're going to say. It's one of those things where it's easy to stare at your phone and yell because you think something is what it is. Like the ocean's a lot bigger than people think. Montana's a lot bigger than you think. And we should have at least a little bit of the geometry to realize where and when you can shoot it down. It actually reminded me of a story. When we went to rescue Captain Phillips, we had to jump out of a C-17 over the Indian Ocean. And we had these big garbage bags. We won't get into what was in them, but I asked before I jumped, I asked the air crew, hey, are you going to throw these out into the Indian Ocean? He goes, no, we're just going to land with them. I'm like, dude, just throw them out. And he said, what if we hit one of your boats? And I said, I'll give you $10,000 if you can. You're not going to hit anybody. It's not, the odds aren't with you. So they should have shot it down over Montana or before that. But I mean, They had to, once the people see it and the president realized we see it, they can't lie their way out of this one. So we just monitored.
That's it.
The funniest one was the meme when it flew over Missouri and someone put a meme of some dude having a barbecue, throwing a beer bottle at it, saying, this is how we handle it in Missouri.
But you just touched on it, right? Because they did not make it public. They didn't make it public when it was in Alaska. The only reason it became public is because the locals in Montana started making a bit about it, a buzz about it. And then the local NBC reported it. And then it grew into a national story. And all the while, the Biden administration, understanding full well this was happening, was planning on still sending Secretary of State Blinken over there to meet with Xi Jinping. The meeting was 100% still on. And it wasn't until it started really blowing up nationally that they were like, oh, okay. Oh, we canceled the meeting. I mean, this is outrageous. Bull, you didn't think it was outrageous. You just bent the knee because we made you bend the knee.
Yeah, you just got caught. They should have shot it down and sent Secretary Blinken that day. Go over there and meet with him. Shot it down. You can't, like it or not, the world is a much safer place when America is strong. And we're very, very weak right now, and we're showing it to them. China's running. They're the puppeteer. We're just at the end of the strings, dancing with whoever's at the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm. I know. Well, that's the problem. Is that just your schoolyard bully history? Not yours in particular. I'm saying one's memories of those moments tell you when the bully starts to be provocative, you really just have to punch him in the face. There's no dancing around it.
That's how it ends. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what they're doing. And we're kind of like hiding behind the one apparatus on the playground. Like, hopefully he won't see us and he'll just take that fist away. Hopefully he won't bother us again. Maybe if we're super nice, but I'm not going to have lunch with you. I'm not going to sit with you at the lunch table. Maybe that'll stop you. We don't have the resolve to do that. And I'm not sure we're really even in the position right now to do that, given everything that's happening in Russia and so on. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I heard jokes saying if we just raise the Ukrainian flag over Montana, maybe then they defend our borders. But it is that thing with the bully too. And China's they're going to keep pushing and pushing. And with Xi Jinping, he's in a spot where he's the most brutal dictator China's ever seen. And that's saying a lot. And that means that no one around him will ever tell him anything resembling the truth. So they're just, they're going to push us as far as they can. And the bully never goes away just because you ask him nicely. Or like you said, you don't just change seats or whatever. China's running the show right now. The good thing is we're like, there's the bully at school, but there's also the big, dumb, good guy that doesn't know how tough he is until he has to fight. And that's us. I mean, there are
Mm.
people in this military, in the Pentagon, in DC, in every branch that knows how to fight. In Space Force, that they had their big opportunity here and kind of blew that one. But if and when we need to, they're always saying how China has more ships than we do in the Navy. Fine, they have a bigger Navy, but if it comes down to it, which I hope it doesn't, they'll find out the hard way. It won't be that's not going to be a fun war, and I'm not advocating for it. But certainly, I'd rather a deterrent than have to fight. And right now, we're not deterring anything. Everyone's realized they can just roll us over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it reminds me of my my college boyfriend who was captain of the lacrosse team at Syracuse. And they won 3 national championships, and he knew a thing or two about competition. And he used to say, and he was from Yorktown Heights, New York, which is, actually kind of where AOC is from. In any event, he used to say, you don't have to fight. You just have to make the other guy believe you want to fight, that you would fight, that you're ready
That's
to.
all it is.
That's it. I never saw him throw a punch, but he certainly projected, I will if you make me.
If you project strength, people will think you're strong. That's why they call it a dog fight. The dog barks loud because you don't want to fight him. I mean, once the dog gets in a fight, then it's kind of over. But the bark, they always say the bark is worse than its bite, and sometimes that's enough. And that's one of our pillars of national defense is other than alliance solidarity and forward defense, it's deterrence, and we're good at that. Right now we're showing that we'd rather be politically correct and inclusive with equity than show strength, than promote by performance instead of feelings. I mean, I heard the other day that feelings are the truth doesn't change no matter how loud you yell at it. So you might as well tell the truth.
That's good. The thing about this balloon is people are like, it can't tell anything more than our satellites can tell. And I don't know that that's true. Canadian Debbie, my crack producer, has given me a couple of stats via the AP, quoting U.S. retired Army General John Ferrari, visiting fellow now at American Enterprise Institute. Says, even if the balloon was not armed, it posed a risk. The flight itself could be used to test America's ability to detect incoming threats and to find holes in our air defense warning system. It may have allowed as well the Chinese to sense electromagnetic emissions that higher altitude satellites cannot detect, such as low power radio frequencies that could help them understand how different U.S. weapons systems communicate. Washington Post quotes another expert who advises the UN Security Council saying, these balloons have a few advantages over the use of satellites or drones. They can obtain better quality images. They could even deploy their own drone systems. They can detect incoming missiles, and their slow speed means they're not always picked up by radar. This needed to be dealt with, and seriously. And so far, we just seem to be getting it's kind of like, what information could they have gotten, and we got rid of it and move on. Nothing to see here.
Well, they're trying to talk us out of it, because they're. I mean, even with saying so far as, well, some flew over when Trump was here. They're trying to justify bad behavior with bad behavior, and that's not the case. The thing this balloon has going for it, like I said, it's moving slower, so it's harder with radar. It's also in closer in the atmosphere, and it can take better pictures. It can get still, and what it's looking at is our response. How do we react to each other, and most importantly, how do we communicate that with each other? Because the first thing China will do, if and when we go to war with them, is knock out our communication. We are talking about space warfare. And if you can imagine, even right now, there are people that can't go anywhere in the country without their GPS, without their global positioning system on their phone, their navigation.
I'm one of them.
Imagine that gets knocked out. Can you use a map and compass? Do you know which direction the sun sets? Can you use the stars? What if you can't talk to someone? How do you communicate? That's the first thing they're going to do. They knock out our communications, which when they talk about classified SEI stuff like that, the classified stuff is not the stuff we did on the ground in bin Laden's house. The classified stuff is how we talk to each other, how certain satellites were talking to different people, how the weapon systems communicate with each other. We use GPS for our missile systems. We use them for everything on the ground, in the air to ground, ground to air, air to air. If we lose that, we can't communicate. That's what China's looking for. How's our response? How do we respond? How do we treat each other afterwards? So, this is a simple. This could be a reconnaissance balloon under the guise of a weather balloon. It doesn't. They're not going to drop a weapon from this, which they could. Everything from drones to chemical to biological to whatever version of COVID we're on. That's what it could be. This is just reconnaissance, and they did it in a way that they knew that we knew it was coming. It was a question of when did we tell our people? When did we tell our Department of Defense and our air systems? And we proved that we're good enough with our new F-22 Raptors to shoot down a balloon. How would that be in the history of air-to-air combat? Your first air-to-air kill as the highest, the most advanced fighter in the world. This first kill is a balloon.
Well, you had a great tweet over the weekend, which was tell the Pentagon the balloon is unvaxxed. They'll get rid of it in no time.
That was just a laying around the couch thinking, well, that's kind of funny. Maybe I'll see what the world thinks of that.
The world approved. I speak on behalf of the world here.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
The Trump administration stuff is interesting too. I mean, it's so absurd to be like, oh, well, Trump did it. Like, could you just focus? Because Trump's no longer president and you got the top job. And if you could just reassure us that you're on top of it, it would make us feel better. But instead, we're getting Trump. And this is what we've found thus far. So Trump's top advisors during his presidency have all backed him up saying, no, there was no Chinese balloon during our time in office. Just a couple of names. John Bolton, who can't really stand Trump, says, I don't know of any. And he had been his national security advisor. Robert O'Brien had been national security advisor as well, unequivocally. I've never been briefed on this issue by anybody. Former acting DNI Rick Grinnell, if a balloon had come up, we would have known. Someone in the intel community would have known. And it would have come up to me to brief the president. Former DNA John Ratcliffe comes out and says, it is not true. I can refute this. It didn't happen. But Wall Street Journal reporting that there was one, maybe more than one, but it went undetected during the Trump administration, that the previous balloon flights were much shorter in duration, possibly explaining why some went undetected, according to, I think, current senior administration officials. And what they say, Rob, is that the information was discovered after the prior administration left. So what they're asking us to believe is that it happened, that literally nobody in the Trump administration knew, not the top intel people, not the top defense people, not the president, but that Joe Biden came into town and he figured it out and knew that this was a pattern beginning during the Trump administration. And I guess still wasn't concerned when balloon number, 70? What number are we on now, Joe Biden? Came over Butte, Montana.
Yeah, you got to figure that. A lot of people in the Trump administration, they're going to, for some reason, try to tell the truth. And like you said, John Bolton hates Donald Trump. But he did say, if it happened, I would have known about it. But they're dealing with people on the other side that are going to lie about pretty much everything. You got to figure, if China didn't admit this was their balloon, the Democrats would have said, oh, this is definitely Russian interference. This is a Russian balloon, and Donald Trump guided it there. And that's not Hunter's laptop. And Adam Schiff should be on the Intel committee. And because he didn't do anything wrong. We don't have Chinese spies sleeping with congressmen. Russia, Trump. I mean, you'll see people say, well, why haven't you denounced communist China? Well, you haven't denounced Trump. It's like, that's not the question. You haven't denounced Trump? It's like, what? One is not the other. You just Trump. That's all they have. And I can't imagine thinking about someone I hate that much. Because I always tell people, if you're feeling bad that's what someone's thinking about you, you wouldn't feel that way if you realize how little they actually think about you. But these people can't stop Trump. True. It's all Trump. Trump, Russia. Even though that's a hoax, they've admitted it, and they haven't admitted it, but it's been proven. They still won't admit it.
Okay, but here's where it gets interesting. Two things. We're going to talk about General Milley in 1 second, but the Chinese, here's what they said. They're mad at us.
Yes.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry declared its strong discontent and protest that we shot down this balloon, saying China had told Washington repeatedly that the balloon was, and I'm quoting here, a civilian aircraft that had inadvertently flown over the United States and that its presence was, quote, totally accidental. Yeah. They go on to express their upset that we would react so excessively, saying we have seriously violated international convention and China retains the right to respond further. I mean, you got to love the chutzpah on these guys. They lied to your face. And depending on what our interests are, our Pentagon, our White House would pretend that we believe it.
We have a tendency to apologize to a lot of people, especially when the left is in power. And, you only went 6,000 miles off course? Okay, no, in a balloon. I've seen stuff on the internet where I hope it started as a joke, but people are catching up on it. And they're saying, prayers up to the two people in the balloon, because, one had the binoculars and one was taking notes. And people are going to believe that nonsense because it's out there. There was nobody. I was going to say, what? No, but that actually was kind of funny because it makes, I guess one guy's looking, one guy's writing, and they switch out. Makes sense. But
that's not the way it works. They don't need to do it that way.
No one's going to fact check China. And when we do, we're going to lie. It's a weather balloon that, we tried to check out the southern part of the east coast of Russia, but we ended up in South Carolina getting shot down just without provocation.
Right. But this gives us enough cover, if we want it, to resume our little meeting with Blinken, right? It's like, oh, well, it was an accident. They said it was an accident. They're upset we shot it down, but we had to act tough. And we did. We acted immediately. And we were definitely going to tell you all along. That's the other thing they're saying. Joe Biden's saying, we were 100% going to be transparent about this all along. Bull.
No.
We know because of the reporters in Montana and the good people of Montana who are like, what
There-
the hell is that thing?
They're semi-transparent when they get caught. And even when they get caught, you can catch some of these guys with their hand in the cookie jar and they would say, that's not my hand.
Yeah.
But I still think they should have the meeting. Still think Blinken should go there. I just wish they would do it with being a little more firm instead of, yes or no, sir, which I think they're.
Well, should there be any consequences? I don't know. Like, I realize we have to deal with China, but like nothing? We're just going to like shrug our shoulders and move on?
I mean, it's tough because, China's infiltrated quite a bit here. So you don't know who in D.C. is on the take. I mean, that's the reason a lot of people make a lot of decisions because people are getting paid on the back end. That's why a lot of people on Capitol Hill in a city that doesn't produce anything are very, very rich. A lot of it's Chinese money.
There's one congressman, it's a Democrat, I'm trying to find his name, but he's out there criticizing this whole thing, saying, oh my God, calm down, Republicans, don't get your panties in a bunch. And it turns out he had some top staffer, was it Chris Murphy? No, it wasn't Chris Murphy. No, it was Don Byers, Democrat from Virginia, who had a staffer fired last year after allegedly being caught spying for communist China. So Don Byers wants us to calm down. He says, great news for my Republican colleagues. They can stop panicking about a balloon now after it had been shot down. Don, I think you need to clean up your own house before you start
That's one of the things.
These.
Clean your own house before you start telling me how to handle mine. I mean, look at like Senator Dianne Feinstein had a Chinese spy driving for her for 2 decades. That's pretty significant. I mean, I'm sure
you mentioned Swalwell. Did he comment? The guy sleeping with a Chinese spy? Like, did he weigh in?
Yeah, you got these dudes that can't get a date in college. They get to Congress, all of a sudden these Asian girls are all over them. I'm starting to see a pattern.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's fascinating. And nobody wants to talk about the Swalwell thing, but it's disgusting.
No, and he won't mention it either. He's as pure as the driven snow.
So this is just on the timing. Annie McCarthy, always doing great reporting at National Review, points out the Biden White House kept the balloon's presence under wraps for fear of derailing that Blinken trip until local media in Billings, Montana published a picture of it on Thursday afternoon. If the balloon had not been noticed by enough members of the public that it was reported by the press, and that the press got onto it, the American Secretary of State would be glad handing in Beijing today, even as China's surveillance aircraft was lolling over our homeland and defense facilities. That's exactly right. That's what was about to happen. But here's where what I want to talk to you about. So do you know Jack Posobiec? He's on.
Yeah.
He worked at OWN. And I have to tell you, I've had a complicated history of this guy. I didn't think much of him at first. And on Twitter, we've sparred a little. I really like this guy now. I have to tell you, I think like he tweets out some really smart and interesting content. And I've become a fan, which is a high compliment because I used to think not so well of him. But he tweeted out something suggesting like what's going on with General Milley. I'm trying to find. He says, did the Chinese spy balloons fly near the U.S. during the Trump administration? And Milley deliberately withheld the intel from the White House. Now, that could just be a random musing. I mean, I get that, right? Because we know Milley undermined Trump. Milley thought he was in control when Trump wouldn't accept the election results and so on. So we actually just went back and refreshed our memories on Milley. Do you remember?
Yeah.
He went to, according to Bob Woodward's book, he went around to the senior officers responsible for launching the nukes and said, okay, the president alone can give that order, but I have to be involved. Looking each in the eye from Woodward's book, Milley asked the officers to affirm that they had understood in what he considered to be an oath. And went on, this is, of course, old reporting now, but just a refresher. He called his Chinese military counterpart on Trump, again, via Bob Woodward, as well as Bob Costas' book, Peril. Milley feared Trump might launch a strike on China. On October 30th, 2020, he called General Lee and said, I want to assure you the American government is stable. Everything is going to be okay. We are not going to attack or conduct any kinetic operations against you. We've known each other for 5 years. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It won't be a surprise. He reportedly believed Trump was unstable, told his Chinese counterpart we're 100% steady in January of 2021. Everything's fine, but democracy can be sloppy. I mean, if you look back at the history, Rob, is it so implausible that maybe it was the intel people like Rick Grinnell and John Bolton and others under Trump who genuinely knew nothing about this. And perhaps there was some knowledge, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs who didn't think it was wise to share too much with President Trump.
Yeah, that's a tough one. As far as General Milley, I've never met the man. I would like to hope someone, the highest ranking officer in the military would have the country's best interest in mind. And if he honestly believed at the time when he called his counterpart in China, just assuring him we're not pushing the button, so don't you push the button. That's I wasn't there for that, but that's definitely out of line as far as the chain of command goes, and it's that's not even a faux pas. So you can't do it. If you think if you think the president's, you don't do that, basically. But like I said, I never met the man. I hope he had the best intentions. But as far as someone in intel knowing about something like a balloon, yeah, I wouldn't put it past a lot of these guys with the compartmentalized intelligence, but the way they tell stuff, because if they don't think the president needs to know. And that's one of the things where he should be able to know everything. That's why he has the power to see everything and declassify whatever he doesn't want to. But what's going on right now in D.C. and with a lot of these people that sometimes just bumping elbows to see what they can do and what they can get after the military, after the intel, which contractor they can work for. Everything as far as not stirring the pot for them or don't tell your boss bad news. It wouldn't surprise me if someone knew and didn't tell anybody. But, it all comes back to Joe Biden getting the intel and then saying, well, I said shoot it down. They said no. That's definitely not so much of a coup, but it's definitely not running the way a smooth military organization should. And when you're dealing with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Pentagon, up to the commander in chief, who is the president, that's a military organization. And there's some that's not the right way to do it.
Well, it could just be a matter of semantics. Like the reports are, he said, I commanded them to do it as soon as possible. And their response was, that has to wait until it's over the Atlantic Ocean. But I would imagine sitting there as a commander in chief, you have the ability to then think and say, why the Atlantic Ocean? Why not over Montana? You couldn't pick a much better state with, huge fields that are open and sparse population to get rid of this thing. It's been over America since last Saturday. Why are we going to wait another half a week to get rid of it? How much information are we going to allow it to obtain before we take it out?
Yeah, it's not the Pentagon's call. It's not the Joint Chiefs call, and it's not the National Security Council's call. It's their job to advise, and the commander in chief makes the call. But it's just the way he did it. And again, he's been known to say things he didn't quite mean, or didn't say in the right way, or just made up a word in some cases. But yeah, he made it sound like I gave the order. They said no, so there. And it's almost one of those things like, okay, did Ron Klein tell you not to do it? Did Barack Obama or Susan Rice tell you not to do it? That you can't do it because you're not actually in charge? We've heard people say that Joe Biden's never made a sound call as far as anything foreign relations his entire career, which is about 5 decades. And even President Obama said never underestimate the opportunity for Joe Biden to screw things up, in not so many words. But that's just that. Is he just lost in the sauce and lost in the swamp? Who knows? But it's definitely not. It doesn't seem like a streamline up and down. People are withholding and then doing stuff that they shouldn't do because they think they're doing the right thing, even though that's not the way to run a biz. But that place is getting. It's if any place needs a bath, it's Washington D.C.
Yeah, I gotta say, Milley and Austin don't instill a lot of confidence either. So it's like, okay, was something you said a minute ago caught my ear, and on the subject of feeling less than confident in these guys. NBC News reported a week ago that the guy who's the head of Air Mobility Command, he's an Air Force general. He's the head of Air Mobility Command, which has nearly 50,000 service members in it, nearly 500 planes, responsible for transport and refueling, said to his people, I hope I'm wrong, but my gut tells me we'll fight in 2025 with China, predicting that Taiwan and the United States are going to have presidential elections in 2024, and thus the U.S. will be distracted, and Xi Jinping will have an opportunity to move on Taiwan. The signed memo is addressed to all Air Wing commanders, among others, and orders them to report all major efforts to prepare for the China fight back to base by February 28th, and says in particular, during the month of February, right now, he directed all personnel to, quote, fire a clip into a 7-meter target with the full understanding that unrepentant lethality matters most. Aim for the head. What's going on here, Rob?
Well, that's a general who's telling it like it is. And he's right that as a nation, we should be preparing for that kind of a war with China. Doesn't mean it's coming, but we've been doing that for a long time. We do get distracted with the bells and whistles of the woke ideology, everything down to making sure every ship should be electric, even though the cleanest form of energy is nuclear, which the ships are, but that's a different conversation. And he's a 4-star general in the Air Force who's basically, he's one of the top dogs. And I'm surprised he still has a job for sending that memo out. I'm sure he's on his way out because they don't like to hear that. They don't want to hear that the military's job is to go defend things and maybe fight a big, fight China and Russia at the same time, which brings Iran into it. That's going to potentially a world war. And, Taiwan's a real problem. It's not because of the land mass of Taiwan. It's because of all the chips that are being built, the microchips and all that stuff. They want to take it for that. But you got to realize that is much different in China than it is in Ukraine, because you don't have European countries there that can kind of put your left foot in, your left foot out. And we're sending these vehicles there, but not really. And we're kind of doing this. And we might be NATO. This is an amphibious assault. And that's going to be, if it comes, that's going to be from China onto the island. And you can't just back off of that. That's a major thing, which will involve the United States Navy, the Japanese Navy, and then Australia as well. So China realized that. But see, China also realizes that they're the one kid policy, the one child policy is going to catch up with them, because pretty soon their infrastructure won't be able to support the elderly. So they're kind of aware of that, even though Xi Jinping is not getting the truth about everything. There are people smart enough to realize that China might not be able to handle a war. So it's not fun to talk about. And thank God all the crazy people have nuclear weapons, which would be a complete disaster for the entire planet life as we know it. But the general did say that prepare for war, and I hope there are more people like him down to the 1-star, then the 06 level, and then to the senior enlisted and all the junior officers who are eventually going to come up and have to lead this, because it wouldn't be fast to start, it wouldn't be fast to defend, and it will take a long, long time. So that's a very scary prospect, and I hope it's not just thrown around with people not really thinking it through.
Yeah, my God, this is the last thing we want to get into, but
we don't need that.
We'll see. Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, said recently, earlier this month, he was asked, is the Chinese invasion of Taiwan imminent? And he said, well, we are seeing some very provocative behavior on the part of China's forces and their attempt to establish a new normal. But does that mean an invasion is imminent? I seriously doubt that. So, they also said that the Afghanistan army was not going to collapse within 11 days. So take it with a grain of salt.
And China's they've been making man-made islands off the coast of China now that they said, we're just doing it for good. We're not going to militarize them. And all they're doing is making stationary aircraft carriers that are militarized now. They are playing chess. They're playing the long game, which is not just Pacific, but they're moving in. They want to move into the Atlantic. They're taking stuff on both sides of the Panama Canal. Like, China's not messing around. And as long as we have a deterrent and stop giving them everything and letting them own us, we could be okay. And we are the unfortunate superpower. We're lucky enough to have oceans on both sides, but one of my favorite sayings is it's a large planet, but it's a small world, and a lot of it's turning red like China.
Gosh, I know those oceans. Thank God for them. But you know what? You can fly little balloons over those oceans, and you get a whole bunch of information on what's happening on this land mass we call America.
Gas prices, we might all be doing that soon.
All right, stand by, Rob. We'll squeeze in a quick break. We'll come right back. More with Rob O'Neill on the opposite side of this break. What's your gift going to be this Valentine's Day? You're running out of time. How about taking 10 or 15 years off your appearance with Genucel skincare? Right now, every most popular package, all their best stuff, 70% off. And that will include the next breakthrough in skincare technology. Listen to this. Genucel's probiotic moisturizer. Absolutely free. These super ingredients found in yogurt, you know about the probiotics if you eat your yogurt, can have the same nourishing benefits and goodness for your skin. Probiotic extracts can target bad bacteria on the surface of your skin to restore balance to your skin's microbiome for a noticeably clearer complexion and visibly younger appearance. See those fine lines, wrinkles, dark spots, sagging jawline, and even bags and puffiness disappear right before your eyes thanks to Genucel. Plus, with its immediate effects product, see results in under 12 hours guaranteed, or your money back. Go to Genucel.com/MK60 right now. And for the first time ever, every order at Genucel.com from now through Valentine's Day includes a beauty box. A beauty box, I say, with 2 luxury gifts. Order now, 2 weeks only, Genucel.com/MK60, GENUCEL.com/MK60. Rob, the January 6th committee is over because that Congress is over and those Democrats have no longer control over the House. But Jamie Raskin, who was on the committee and helped lead it, is still out there saying he believes they did good work and he believes that what they found will help the Department of Justice indict President Trump. Still believes that President Trump will be indicted based on his behavior in connection with January 6th. This, as we get this tweet, I'm sorry, but it must be discussed publicly, from a member of our media. Lawrence O'Donnell, over there at MSNBC, tweets out this picture of the Capitol. And for our listening audience, it's just a picture of the Capitol from inside the Capitol from the look of it. And he writes, today is my first time inside the Capitol since Jan 6. Everything looks the same, but it doesn't feel the same. Maybe I'll get used to it again. But now it feels like a visit to an historic battlefield. Out of every window, you see the paths of the attackers. He's just like you. He's basically like, you shot bin Laden. He went to January 6th long after. He went to the Capitol long after January 6th and took this picture, Rob. So you guys are the same. Just like being on a historic battlefield together.
Hallowed ground. Yeah. I actually, I retweeted that with, I said, so there I was, no shit. Because that's how we always start a story when you're kind of just telling a lie. There I was, knee deep in brass and hand grenade pins. It was crazy. The Vietcong all around me. It's like, come on, dude. Like they just love January 6th so bad. They want, they say it's the greatest threat to democracy, the greatest attack on democracy since the Civil War, which to me I would think is an insult to the people who died in the towers, Pentagon, Flight 93, who died at Pearl Harbor. For the they love it. They can't get away from it. And Donald Trump fills so much space in these people's heads that if they had anything on him, he would be in prison now. They would have it. We got Adam Schiff saying, we have it. It's going to be groundbreaking. And when we release it, you don't have anything. If you did, you would. Everyone's trying to indict him, and they just seem like they have nothing. And January 6th, they're blowing it way out of proportion. Yes, they can see the lines of the attackers because that's where the red velvet ropes are. They stayed in the ropes. And they went into the speak. I mean,
yes, that's what somebody. Billboard Chris tweeted out. Never forget how they almost breached the velvet ropes. Can you just stop? So first of all, even if you were there, this is not an appropriate way to talk about what happened on January 6th. But especially Lawrence O'Donnell was nowhere near Capitol. He was not there. So for him to talk about like the trauma, like going back there, the battlefield. Oh, could you stop? You weren't there. No. This wasn't Abbottabad. Have some perspective.
It was worse in Minneapolis in 2020 when they were actually burning the city down in mostly peaceful protests. I mean, should they have gone to the Capitol like that? Absolutely not. But it was more of a herd mentality of, look what we're doing. I mean, they broke a few gates and stuff. And then, one person was murdered that was an attacker by a cop with a negligent discharge that he should never done anyway. But then they tried to make more deaths than there was. Like someone accidentally hit themselves with a taser and had a heart attack, which I shouldn't be laughing about, but it wasn't
no, but they continued.
Mayhem. They didn't burn the Capitol down. It wasn't like Paul Revere was riding around saying the British are coming. It was a bunch of people that were cold.
The battlefield, like a historic battlefield. Out of every window,
he's a real hero.
Paths of the attackers. Okay, so he's got a flair for the dramatic, this one. Let me ask you about Ukraine quickly, because I saw you tweeting on Ukraine and I am interested. So we're sending tanks, but we're saying no to F-16s for now. But the New York Times quick to remind us, well, F-16s may be a temporary no. We may basically get Germany or some European country to do it, to send F-16s, I guess, that we've already given them, send theirs to Ukraine. So it's not us directly. But what do you make of this? Sending the tanks are okay, but not the F-16s.
Well, the tanks are okay because it's going to take a long time for them to build. And for some reason, they're saying they need to build them from the bottom up, which is going to take 5 years maybe to get them there, which is good for the military industrial complex because that means we get to keep paying the budget for at least 5 more years for people who are on the take, who are sending this big armor in there. And, it's a huge budget for the Pentagon, but when they lose 39% of it, what's the big deal? They won't get audited. Not a problem. When we have, I don't know the numbers, but we have maybe 1,000 or more M1A1 Abrams tanks in Europe already. I mean, or with the tens of billions of dollars we've already laundered to Zelensky, why can't he just buy them with those? But someone's on the take here somewhere, and they're putting. You don't need those tanks in there to defeat tanks. We could defeat tanks with a couple Javelin units, which are anti-tank missiles that can destroy any tank in the world, to include the Abrams. But that would be less of a footprint and a lower paycheck for someone who's making these decisions, and obviously buying stock in the company that makes them. But yeah, they're going to. They already have Bradley fighting vehicles in there, which can destroy tanks, and those can move. They got great armor that's interactive. The people that we do need, the smart guys, the engineers that design the armor, have made the Bradley, so they'll defeat anything Russia has. And if we wanted to destroy the tanks, we could, but they're tiptoeing towards a world war because technically, obviously, Ukraine is not a NATO country. But now that we're sending tanks in, and Germany's saying, well, we'll send tanks in if you send tanks in, and so are the Brits. And like, I'm pretty sure the last time Germany sent tanks over borders, not a lot of good stuff comes out of it. But now that for some reason they want to send the tanks in there, and people are getting paid, so they're not. And whatever's really happening in Ukraine is still maintaining whatever cover up it is. So they're going to do it. And they're going to send the tanks there. And then if F-16s come in, then I mean, I don't know when you have to admit that we're actually contributing to this war, but we've got Patriot missiles there. We've got advisors on the ground. We're training people. Poland wants to send people in. It's like it's getting touchy. Like again, because at some point someone's got nuclear weapons, and again, that's not good. I don't advocate any of this, but both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, man, they sure do love keeping wars going.
It is disturbing. I mean, like tiptoeing into World War III, like you just said, that's nothing any of us should want. If you think the Ukrainian cause is a noble one or not, you got to have serious pause about that. We're not in a war right now. We, America, are not actively in a war for the first time in a long time. And you're raising some interesting points about how there's always a group that kind of wants it and rushes toward it. And there are all sorts of financial reasons, why they do it. And we're, historically too afraid to ask those questions, but we shouldn't be.
Well, it's like the whole thing with there's no money in the cure, but there sure is money in the treatment. So we can keep pumping these tanks out as long as we need them somewhere.
I didn't realize that we had so many tanks over in Europe already.
Oh yeah, we have a lot there because of the Cold War. We still have NATO because at the end of World War II, we started NATO to stop Russia, and then we just kept it. Like we're really good at creating stuff, but I've never seen anything by any government have a problem, make a department, say, well, fix that, and then disband the department. We just keep it going. The Pentagon's still there. That was a World War II thing for the Department of War, but we'll just keep it there and just keep putting. We used to call, as operators, the Pentagon the five-sided wind tunnel, because it's a place where you can go, there's a lot of wind blowing through, and even a one-star general doesn't have a parking spot because there's so many people working there.
Oh my goodness. The things you learn. All right, so shifting gears to another military man, just like you, just exactly like you, except not even in a little. Prince Harry. He is out there bragging about his exploits, giving a number to the number of Taliban that he killed in his memoir. I've been dying to ask you about this as somebody who actually is a decorated hero. What did you make of that controversy? Because there were a lot of Brits who had served, honorably, who said, not okay. You put the current troops in danger, and you made yourself look bad, and you made the rest of us look bad because nobody goes out there and gives the specific numbers of their kills. What did you make of it?
With Prince Harry, he was flying or co-piloting or the gunner of an Apache attack helicopter, and whenever they get called to engage, it's because people on the ground are in trouble and they really need help, and Apaches always come through. And as far as if he's really killing Taliban and Al-Qaeda forces, I wish he would have killed more. I'm fine with that. He said what he said, and there were chess pieces here and there, with blah blah blah. I don't have a problem with him doing that. I was not with him. I never served with him, and he was there. And I've heard different things, but if I hear people talk about other people that weren't with him, I take it with a grain of salt. If he killed him, fine. If he has a number, that's great. I've been in a lot of combat. I don't know how to confirm a kill, and I don't know how many I have. I know who the last guy I killed was. It actually wasn't bin Laden, but it was the same gun. But if he's, newsflash, we find bad guys and we have people that shoot him. If an Apache helicopter kills him, that's great. As far as putting people in danger, if it radicalizes someone, possibly. But they hated us before. They hated us on 9/10. They hate us now. It's not really. I don't think it's going to change that much. And he's just out there to sell books. I think some people were calling him Bunker Harry because he was just down in there watching movies with people. But he went. Thanks for his service, and he's flying an Apache. That's cool.
What do you think the buzz is like in the military community about doing that? About saying they were just like chess pieces on the board to me, and I killed at least 20 or whatever his number was.
Yeah, it's a lot more personal, face to face. When you're up close killing someone in their own bedroom, it is more personable, and you do think about the humanity, especially when there's families involved. So I wouldn't say chess pieces. For me, it was like me and this guy got in a fight, and I killed him simply because we were born on different parts of the earth. I didn't even know him; he didn't know me. But we both had guns. He picked up a gun because I was in his room, and I was in his room because someone made a decision for us to go there. It gets personal. There's definitely humanity involved, and chess pieces I don't think is fair because in my experience in a couple different theaters, most people, the vast majority in the 90s, are just trying to raise their families and get on with their lives like the rest of us, and they have to deal with us and with Al-Qaeda. Not sure who's the bad guy because we're the occupiers and these are the extremists. So it's everyone who's killed, regardless of your ideology, someone believed you were the good guy, and they all have fathers and they all have mothers, and someone misses them. So, it's a lot to think about years out. That's why I have a tendency to throw around phrases like military industrial complex, because when I was 27, I'll invade Canada. I'm ready to fight. But now I'm older, and it's like, what are we really doing? So I try to be more thoughtful with it. And, on Twitter, I'm only 60% serious.
Yeah, no, same. I mean, that's what Twitter's for. No, but I heard similar sentiments from Dakota Meyer about, his historic fight. Just like, what are we doing here? He's about to kill me. I'm about to kill him. And for what? And because other people made decisions, the land's away. And it is complex. I guess I get it. I'm actually getting the controversy. I think I was the one who thought the number was more controversial and the chess pieces wasn't. But a lot of the military guys responded to the chess pieces thing that he said. And now, I see what you're saying. You're kind of persuading me over the other way.
It was some of those training scars too. I always get a kick out of confirmed kills. We used to have a thing on our wrist before the war started that we'd wear, keeping count of rooms and houses and numbers and stuff like that, and how many unknowns were left and how many you killed. And I stopped wearing it because when I got in combat, I'm like, I didn't need to come out of a room and ask, did I just kill a guy just now? Oh yeah, that's one for me. So,
yeah.
As far as the numbers, I don't know. I mean, I like I said, I remember my first, I remember one in the middle, and I remember my last.
All right, shifting gears to last night's Grammys. Did you watch them?
I caught the highlights.
I didn't watch them. I have no interest in that, I got to say. I'm like, yeah. I don't have any interest in these people. I don't have any interest in like the fact. I really don't. Like, I'm just whatever. But I will say that Sam Smith's performance is making a lot of headlines today because apparently he went out there and did this whole devil. Look, here's a clip. This devil-themed performance celebrating Satan. Remember that SNL? Satan, exactly, church lady. Yeah. BDSM themes. Halfway through the song, he added a horned hat to his look. And then, of course, as if on cue, the whole thing ends and it has the banner sponsored by Pfizer.
That was something, wasn't it?
It's an amazing troll, really, of the right wing. And the right wing is upset.
I think that Sam Smith is trolling the right. I really do. Because the thing is, we're saying these are all demons. This is a demonic cause, and they're all into this BDSM and the devil. And Sam Smith loves. He kind of went out of the limelight for a while, and I think based on the nipple tassels in his latest video, I think he likes attention. Yes. And
what's
I think
going
he's
on?
Going for it again, and that's a big stage. And it's, brought to you by Pfizer. That's good. I mean, you see that on there's a certain cable news network that everything is sponsored by Pfizer because they made a lot of money during a lockdown recently. I'm not sure if you remember, but it's a lot of it is thumbing the nose at a lot of people and whatever. I mean. We've had heavy metal bands that I love that have had, they have a pentagram, they shout at the devil, all this stuff, and it's been around there. I mean, if you believe and your time's up, you're going to wish you didn't do it. I'm happy with where I am. I think I've made peace. So if you're going to get
more disturbed by this video. I'm more disturbed by this video that we're showing here that you just referenced. Not the devil stuff, but the nipple. First of all, if you were a man, you do not need nipple covers. What are you doing with nipple covers? Nothing coming out of that nipple that you need to cover. Whatsoever, okay? So take them off.
I've seen that video, and it's not my thing, but I really have an appreciation for the ass choreography. Those guys had it going on. They were good at it.
I don't know. I feel
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable.
And they had the things that resembled someone peeing on them, which again, hey.
Oh yeah, that's happening here. This is worse to me than the Satan video. Yeah. I don't really think it's about devil worship. It's like whatever. I mean, I'm sure it's a middle finger to Christians. They basically said as much, that they don't feel accepted. His partner on the thing said, we don't feel accepted by, Christianity or whatever. There's a trans person. I have to be honest, it doesn't bother me. That other video bothers me a lot more. Although I do own a media company called Devil May Care.
What did you think of Dr. Jill's dress? Because I know you love it when they call her
Dr. Jill. She got a standing ovation. I was not a big fan of the dress. She got a standing ovation. Even without them calling her doctor. And see, Jill, you can do it. You don't need the honorarium everywhere you go. That's number one. And number two,
I love
Melania. I'm sure Melania Trump was given this same opportunity, Rob, but just was too busy to present Song of the Year.
First lady stuff going on, and she's not a doctor. I read the New York Times today when they were saying that Dr. Jill's dress was gleaming like Lizzo's dress or something like that. The smile or whatever. Lizzo is great. I screwed that up, but it cracked me up that they're comparing them all. And they throw the doctor in there all the time. It's like when I walk past the post office and it says heroes work here. It's like you're kind of throwing that word around loosely, but whatever. Get some.
That's an amazing image, Rob O'Neill. You think really?
I was walking past the post office with my wife, and it said "Heroes work here," and I said, "Did Buzz Aldrin get a second job? What's going on?"
They were saying that about the grocery store workers during COVID too. Heroes were like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, we appreciate it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it's
Like, I
coming
love
in.
that guy in the liquor store, but Hero seems strong.
Thanks for the discount on this keto bread that I love.
Rob O'Neill, so fun to see you. Thank you for being here.
Anytime, Megyn. Thanks. Great to see you.
That right there is an actual American hero. And remember, folks, you can find the Megyn Kelly Show live on SiriusXM Triumph Channel 111 every weekday at noon East. Full video show and clips at youtube.com/Megyn Kelly. And follow us as an audio podcast, too, for free. Spotify, Apple, Pandora, Stitcher, wherever you like. It's free, and you can check out the archives. I have never been able to compost before. Always seemed too complicated, like too much work, too weird. Not anymore. Thanks to Lomi. Lomi is allowing me to turn my food scraps into dirt with the push of a button, and it's fun for the whole family. Lomi is a countertop electric composter that turns scraps to dirt in under 4 hours. There's no smell when it runs, and it's super quiet. You don't even know it's there. Thanks to Lomi, I have way less garbage each week, and instead, I am turning our family's food waste into nutrient-rich dirt that I can feed to my plants. Now I am composting and creating soil instead of waste. I have a basically limitless supply of dirt from my garden, and you can have all of this too. If you would like to start making a positive environmental impact or just make cleanup after dinner that much easier and fun for the whole family, Lomi is perfect for you. Go to lomi.com/MK and use the promo code MK to get $50 off your Lomi. $50 off when you head to lomi.com/MK and use that promo code MK at checkout. Food waste is gross. Lomi is your solution. Lomi.com/MK. We hear nothing but praise and adulation in the corporate media surrounding the transgender experience these days. But what about the people who have transitioned and realized that it was a massive mistake for them? Their voices are usually suppressed and marginalized. A new Daily Caller documentary called Damaged, the Trans of America's Kids, gives these detransitioners a platform to tell their side of the story with a hefty warning in the process. Co-producer of Damaged and Newsmax contributor Chrissy Clark is here with us, along with Chloe Cole, a detransitioner who is featured in the documentary. Welcome to the show, Chrissy and Chloe. Great to have you both.
Thanks for having us, Megyn.
I appreciate it. All right, so let me start with you, Chrissy, as the person who helped make this and put this together. Why did you think this was necessary, and why'd you call it Damaged?
Well, first off, corporate media refuses to touch this subject. I know we had ABC or NBC touch it briefly, and they got a lot of pushback for it. But the problem is that this is not just one part of the issue. It's not just kids that undergo the transition like Chloe did and then regret it in one way. There are so many different stories and so many different kids that are undergoing this in so many different ways that we wanted to be able to tell the story of multiple people. This takes you through Walt Hayer, who is, I believe he's in his 80s now. He transitioned when he was in the 1980s, when he was in his 40s. And then we're telling the story of Chloe, who's young. She's 18 years old, and she underwent this all before she was 18. So we wanted to be able to tell all the different stories from all different perspectives, the ones that you won't hear from corporate media.
Was it hard to find detransitioners like Chloe to speak to you? Because we know that they get bullied viciously when they say that they're going to detransition. It's kind of crazy the amount of pressure they get not to detransition. So was it hard to find people to speak about it on cam?
Right. Chloe is our godsend. Seriously. She was always willing to speak up. And she, I think, has really ignited other people to speak up as well. I wouldn't necessarily say it was hard. I think it was hard to find people that wanted to go on with their real names. That's usually the hardest part about all of this. But there are a lot of people that have this story and that do want to speak up. So no, it wasn't hard because there are so many people that this has happened to. And they are pining to get the story out because they're willing to speak. And it's incredible. And I really do applaud Chloe. She has been one of the most vocal people about this. And because of that, she's prompted other people to come forward. So shout out to the bravery of an 18-year-old doing more than most mainstream media outlets are about this subject.
That's crazy, Chloe. You're only 18 years old right now.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You were just watching you in the film.
Since I was 17.
You're so articulate. You have such a nice mature presence about you. I mean, granted, you've been through a lot in your 18 years, but Wow, I didn't realize that you were currently 18. That's incredible. So I have to say, one of the things that jumped out at me about your story was about a week or two ago, we had on Dr. Leonard Sachs, who wrote Why Gender Matters, among many other parenting books. He's well worth a read if you're going to have kids. And he maintains that gender does matter and that it's a real thing, even to this day. Shocking, controversial. And one of the things he was saying, I heard in your testimonial, which was he said, some young girls see nothing but sexualized images of girls all over the internet. And also women complaining about childbirth or menstruation or, sexual harassment, how difficult it is to be a woman. But in particular, the sexualization of women with the big bodies and the plastic surgeries, and that there are young girls out there thinking, that's not me. And I don't want that to become me. And this can be a trigger for some to start thinking about transitioning. And I confess to you, Chloe, in the back of my mind, I was like, really? Could that do it? Like, could that? And that's in part your story.
Yeah, it was because I had been exposed to these images for so long, and also due in part because I also hit puberty at a young age, and I was subject to a lot of comments on my body from other people, including like my peers and even some adults. I was very conscious of my body, and I actually developed body dysmorphia, which went undiagnosed until after I transitioned.
Mm-hmm. So you're just a normal, like, American girl. Talk about your family life and how it was and where you are, if you have siblings, where you are in the birth order, all of that. Just help us get to know you a little.
Yeah, I'm in a pretty nuclear family. I have both my parents are in the picture. I've got four older siblings, but they're all half siblings, and not all of them were in the picture because some of their parents had more custody over them than my parents did, and so they weren't always at home when I was. And all of them are about 7 to 8 years older than me, so I wasn't particularly close to them.
So what was your childhood like? Like, was it happy? Was it dysfunctional? And I know there's a couple of incidents highlighted in the film, but overall, how would you describe it?
With socializing and with school, it was pretty difficult for the most part. I'm actually on the spectrum, and because of that affected my socialization and my performance in school. And it didn't help that I was diagnosed a lot later. There was one grade when I finally, after a few years of being bullied and not really fitting with my peers, I finally managed to fit in and make some friends. But immediately after that, right before middle school, I moved neighborhoods and schools, and I was pretty much back at square one. And so I had turned to the internet to make friends. And that was what led to my exposure to the LGBT and transition.
So you were age 11 when your parents got you a phone?
Yeah.
This is very scary. I have an 11-year-old right now who is dying for me to get her a phone. She turns 12 in April. A lot of parents out there, and you're told everyone has one, and you're supposed to, Dr. Sachs was saying too, like, so what? It doesn't matter. So when you got the phone, like, talk about how you got drawn into those websites. Like, how did that go?
Well, everybody my age was using apps like Kik, Instagram, Snapchat, and I started using Instagram and Snapchat, mostly Instagram. And I started seeing a lot of content that was almost completely left-wing, a lot of feminist content, and then eventually some LGBT-centered content. And at first it was because I was kind of a nerdy kid, I liked cartoons and video games and stuff. And usually I would be active I would lurk in communities around that kind of thing. And there was kind of like an overlap between the people in those communities and being gay or bisexual or identifying as trans. I'm not exactly sure why, but eventually the algorithm started recommending me specifically LGBT content, and it was mostly kids my age or younger adults who almost all female who identified as trans.
Oh, this is so interesting. Now, wait, when you say that in those communities, do you mean the gaming community?
Yeah.
Yes, I literally cartoons, just went to a seminar on this at our school, and they were talking about, and I heard you mention this in the documentary too. There's a lot of anime that is pornographic and potentially, brings up trans themes and so on. I mean, a lot of parents are like, oh, anime, Japanese anime, that's harmless. No, you need to be aware.
Yeah, I mean, there are some films and series that are pretty clean, but even in anime that isn't like specifically like explicitly pornographic, there is often like very sexual themes, very sexualized character designs, and
once you click on it, then as you point out, the algorithms got you pegged in a certain way. That's really interesting to me, is that suddenly, without sort of willingly entering this community, they pulled you in. The internet starts forcing it on you. And before you know it, you're in a dangerous zone because you're young and you're suggestible. And as you point out, a lot of young people who think that they're trans, correct me if I'm wrong, Chloe, are in fact on the spectrum.
Yes. I mean, upwards of about 30%.
Why do you think that is?
And almost, well, I've heard from other transgender people that, I mean, puberty is pretty rough for just about anybody, but it's especially rough for us because of a lot of us have sensory difficulties. We don't adjust very well to change. And a lot of people on the spectrum also struggle socially. And I would say that's a big part of it. But also, autistic people, many of us have a tendency to hyperfixate on things. And that's definitely true in my case. A lot of what led to my dysphoria was hyperfixation on things like my body image, and things that I thought were wrong with me as a girl.
Like what?
And it's not only autism. It's not only autism.
Yeah,
a lot of people who have dysphoria have some other sort of comorbidity, including ADHD, depression, anxiety, cluster B personality disorders, and the list goes on. And every trans person or dysphoric person I know around my age either has some sort of family trauma or like a trauma that's sexual in nature, like having been abused or assaulted, and usually at a young age.
That, Chrissy, you guys point this out in the documentary. I think 4 out of the 5 detransitioners you highlight had a sexual assault in their past. How is that, the connective tissue?
Yeah, well, one detransitioner put it very aptly for us. Walt Hayer was telling us essentially that when like Chloe or Walt, unfortunately, were touched in X area, they're not interested in actually being transgender. It's just a coping mechanism for not allowing anybody to touch that part that was, obviously a sexual assault. They don't want that to happen again. And so this is their way of coping with it. And just like Chloe said, it is perfect. She said it perfectly. What happens is autistic kids or kids on the spectrum get hyperfixated on something, and they get hyperfixating on fixing this problem. And there are no longer any psychologists out there that are willing to push back and say, no, this is not what you are. Instead, it is affirm, affirm, affirm. We know for a fact that cognitive behavioral therapy is some of the best therapy you could have. If you've ever been to a therapist, you know that they push back against your ideology. That is when you grow in therapy, and that is no longer happening. So these children fixate on it. And then on top of it, all the parents and the psychologists are saying, affirm, affirm, affirm. And it doesn't actually get to the root problem of the sexual assault. It just affirms the delusion.
So, Chloe, you had a couple things going against you. You had you're on the spectrum, which has led to some of these things that you were talking about that might make this more appealing to you. And then there was a sexual assault, a groping that happened of you. At what age?
I was 13. I was about a year into socially transitioning and a few months after I started medically transitioning as well. And by this point in time, I didn't really tell anybody about it. I didn't realize just how much it affected me until a few years later, actually. I mean, for a while, I didn't even recognize it as a sexual assault because I just thought of it as, well, I'm a boy, so I'm supposed to man up and not cry about it. And I thought of it as, well, maybe this is just boys being boys. And I knew that even if it was something that I wanted to like report, because it happened within a classroom. I could have reported it to the school office, but I knew that it was very likely that they would have just let the kid off with a slap on the wrist, and he could have come back to school like within a week and potentially do something worse to me if I spoke up.
And this was what happened during the exchange?
He had been bullying and harassing me for pretty much the whole school year. And eventually one day he just went too far. He went up to me in a classroom and he squeezed one of my breasts. He looked me in the eyes as he did it, and nobody around me even seemed to notice or care.
Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. That's not boys being boys. I have two boys. They would never in a million years behave like that. There's something wrong with that kid. And we need to do a better job just in general of teaching kids those boundaries. Boys will be boys does not encompass behavior like that. That's not normal. That's abusive. So I'm sorry you had to deal with that, but that was one of the things that just like we were just saying, you were like, I shouldn't even have these breasts. The breasts will be gone. He won't be able to do that to me. And I know that, so you said that at 13, was that the first time? Because you got the phone at 11. So when was the first, because I know you started to bind your breasts and do things like that. When was the first time you started doing sort of transition-like behavior?
Well, about when I was about 12, that's when I started changing my name and like cutting my hair shorter and buying boys' clothes. And then at 13, at 13 was when I started to go the medical route, starting with puberty blockers and testosterone.
Oh, so young at 13, my God. I mean, so the thing is, we've heard this from Abigail Schreier, Chrissy, we've heard this from Deborah So, but there are a lot of girls like Chloe who get the phone or get the iPad and then spend hours in this other world where all they get is affirm, affirm, affirm. That was you. So actually, before I go to Chrissy, Chloe, did your parents not realize you were doing, like, now in today's day and age, and this wasn't so long ago, but we spy on our kids. We try to make sure, the good parents, for the most part, try to make sure they're not doing stuff like that. Or you don't let your kid in the bedroom for 3 hours on their iPad when they're 13 years old. So like, what was going on there?
I mean, they wouldn't really monitor what I was doing. They didn't really know what content I was accessing. I mean, they would take my phone at night, but...
Like if they walked into the room while you were on one of these websites, what would you do?
I mean, they wouldn't even look at my phone.
So are you an advocate for nosy parents?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm not just looking to make myself feel better, but all my fellow moms and dads out there who, it's for your children's safety. It really is. It's like letting them play with a gun and you don't know whether it's loaded or if it's real. Like, oh, I'll just chance it. I don't want to invade their privacy. No, you must for their safety. So Chrissy, that's the thing, is like long hours on the internet and the influence of people who don't have your child's best interest on the internet, having access to them for hours in their bedroom at night.
Right. And I got to say, there's a third component to it, and that is that public schools are rife. They've created a world and a space that makes this kind of ideology perfect to permeate throughout the school districts. Okay. So you not only have this going on at home where your kid is allowed to have access to the phone, the internet, they start off with something innocent like anime or Disney, and then they're subjected to a bunch of wokeness and insanity that tells them that they're transgender. But then you go into the school district, and the school districts are pushing this as well. They're not pushing back, and they're there to cut the parent out of the conversation. That's become their role. It's become the role of any sort of psychologist or any sort of counselor at school. They cut the parent out, and then the parent can't do anything, because if they do play a role, if they do take away a phone, the parents are told that the child will then commit suicide. I know Dr. Deborah So has talked about this. Abigail Schreier has talked about it. It is a lie that parents are told time and time again, that you would rather have an alive son than a dead daughter.
Yeah, Dr. Sachs was saying on our program 2 weeks ago that 88% of children who express some sort of gender dysphoria, if left alone, will revert back to their biological sex. Just leave them alone. And 88% will wind up reverting back to their biological sex. And most of these turn out to be gay boys and sometimes gay girls, like lesbian
Right,
girls.
but we don't have numbers on this right now because we don't have any medical establishment or any doctor that's willing to actually come out and say, no, this is really happening. We have Reddit threads with 46,000 detransitioners. But if you ask a gender activist or a gender doctor, they'll say 99% of people who undergo this treatment, they don't regret it. Yet we have thousands of people, and Chloe herself can tell you there are so many untold stories. And Chloe, I loved the part of your story specifically I didn't love it, but you know what I mean? I loved hearing about it because no one else would touch this. She didn't have anybody that would help her when there were issues with her gender reassignment process. When she had issues and difficulties, not a single doctor was there. So how could we count it when the doctors are happy to do the work for the money and the surgeries, and then they're gone as soon as you really need them?
Well, wait, we'll get to that one second too. But before we get to the detransitioning, on the transitioning, so you expressed to your parents, I think I'm a boy, and I'm sure your parents were taken aback. But
Yeah.
how did it come about that you got on hormones at such a young age? And what was the messaging? Because I know your dad at least said, what percentage of the kids regret this? And he was misled.
Yeah. I mean, at first they were okay with me like cutting my hair and wearing different clothes and even changing my name. But when I expressed that I wanted to medically transition, obviously they were against this. They wanted me to wait until I was 18 and I was responsible for myself. So they decided that after I came out to them, that they would take me to a therapist to get these feelings sorted out and maybe figure out where they come from. And that never happened. They were just
Well, I know
told that.
in the film you say you had one, I think it's, forgive me, I think it was you who said you had one therapist who was no good. And then you found another who was just affirm.
Yeah. I mean, every single person, pretty much every doctor, every physician, and every psychologist I've had was affirming. And they always referred to me by the preferred name. They always said like, oh, I'll refer to you as he, as a boy. And they told my parents, like, I mean, less than 1% of people regret transitioning. And they never presented any other options. And they even told them that, I mean, were I not to go down this route, then I would be at risk of suicide, which I wasn't even suicidal by that point.
So they're saying Chloe's going to kill herself unless you let her transition to being a boy. And 99% of people who go through the transition have no regrets, both of which are lies, upon which you base decisions to actually have surgeries and take dramatic steps to change your gender.
Yes.
My God, you must be angry. Are you angry? I'm angry for you.
Absolutely.
I don't blame you. I feel like you've been so let down by a community that you tell me, Chrissy, but they seem very like, what? It's good. And one of the great things about this piece, Damaged, again, is the name of the film, produced by the Daily Caller, is that you managed to get Dr. Joshua D. Safer, interesting name, executive director of Mount Sinai Center for Transgender Medicine and Surgery, on camera. He gave you a long interview. And I have to say, with all due respect, because Mount Sinai is a great institution, this guy doesn't seem like he could care less about people like Chloe. I mean, he just didn't care. He was like, oh, it's fine. He was talking about it like it's giving them an aspirin. That was my impression in listening to him. And here he is talking about if you're over 18, it's happening. It's SOT, I think, 8.
If you're over 18, unless we find a reason why we want to spend more time thinking about it with you, we take you at your word. If you come and you tell us that you are transgender and there's nothing else going on, most people who come and tell us that they understand gender identity and they are transgender and they are looking for treatment, that is really true, and we go with that.
My God, Chrissy, 18, you can't even drink yet. But all you have to do is walk in and say, I'm trans, and they'll give you a surgery.
Oh, actually, you don't have to be 18. He let me know that in the documentary as well. I said, is there any case in which you could come in here and say, I'm underage and I want to get my boobs cut off? Could I do that? Absolutely. He said everything is a case by case basis. And if there was somebody that the example he used was if I have a young girl who is going to college in September and she turns 18 on September 21st, we would do the surgery before she leaves so that she could be in the care of her parents at the age of 17. So they're performing it underage too. Don't let them lie to you. The craziest part about the Safer interview, I will say, was how many times I had to turn the camera off so he could tell me how uninformed I was. I brought up Dr. Genucel. I brought up Dr. Lisa Lippman. Yep, I brought up Dr. Lisa Lippman. He refused. He would not talk to me about it. He said that rapid onset gender dysphoria was a lie made up by kooks. So no, these people don't actually care about doing any of the data or the research. They're just interested in making money off of a medical establishment that's selling these kids' lives.
That was horrifying, and it's reason alone to watch this piece because she says, what about Dr. Lippman of Brown University, who did an in-depth study on rapid onset gender dysphoria, that suggesting that this is a social contagion, in particular amongst teenage girls, that deserves further pause than this Dr. Safer is giving it before he starts cutting people. And he turns right to the camera. He says, "Can we turn this off?" And then I guess scolded you. Is that what happened? That you shouldn't have been bringing up to him?
Yeah, actually, it happened twice. We had to turn the cameras off, and he had to give me a lesson on how uneducated I am. I'm just sitting there. I kind of laugh. I can't take too much of this stuff seriously when it comes to somebody trying to lecture me about something.
Did
where
he
you
know
have
you were with the Daily
political
Caller?
Yes.
Yeah. Did he know that you were?
Yeah. And he was very concerned that I was trying to do a Matt Walsh-esque gotcha piece. And I was like, no, sir, I will just let you say this all for yourself. I am not trying to gotcha you in any way. We're just trying to get the facts out. We reached out to a ton of other people. We reached out to Jack Turpin, who's notoriously known for his studies that claim that, rapid onset gender dysphoria doesn't exist. The 99% statistic that we talk about, 99% of transgender patients. This is an individual who is funded by the very hormone drugs that cross-sex hormones that change Chloe temporarily. Those are funded by this guy, Jack Turpin. We wanted to sit down with him. We wanted to sit down with Dylan Mulvaney, anyone that would talk to us. These people just didn't want to get back to us. But thank goodness Dr. Safer did, because, for all the crazy things he said, at least he had the balls to show up.
Yeah, exactly. He still has his balls. It's just changing that for others.
Taking them off of others.
Chloe, she mentioned Dylan Mulvaney. Can we spend a minute on Dylan Mulvaney? Because Dylan has taken the internet and the White House by storm. Dylan is a biological man who is a trans girl now, woman. And Dylan has been featured, we talked about this on the show, as like talking about Dylan's girlhood, Dylan's, it's like there was no girlhood. Dylan was raised as a biological boy and is now saying that Dylan is a girl, and went through to get this facialization surgery, which set the internet on fire last week because Dylan looks very feminine now with the facial bones thanks to massive plastic surgery. Dylan only transitioned, I think, about 2 minutes ago. I mean, truly, it's been extremely fast and extremely disturbing from the outside. Like, how many surgeries can you fit into 1 year? How many unethical doctors can you find to change everything there is about you? What did you make of that, watching it over the past year or so?
Well, first of all, I find it uncomfortable that he refers to himself as a girl rather than a woman. Like, he's a 25-year-old biological male. It's a little bit late to be referring to yourself as a girl. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because I'm a teenage girl myself, but I just find a lot of discomfort in that. But I saw the news of the facial feminization surgery last week, and I mean, it's clear that this guy is just not in a good place. And he's being failed in the same way as I was by my own doctors. And he's clearly being enabled by the doctors. And I mean, it's horrific that anybody feels like they have to do that to themselves, that they have to take a bone saw to the jaw, to their skull in the first place.
You're right. He's been asked to the White House, interviewing President Biden. I mean, again, a spokesperson for Ulta Beauty on girlhood. It's insane. Like, we can't find enough actual women to speak about actual girlhood. We've now got to go to people who have been claiming to be a girl for, like I say, 2 minutes. There's something wrong and disturbing about it. And you raise a good point. As an actual girl, why is a 25-year-old biological man trying to say that he's just like you? Like, you have your own unique experience. All of this stuff presses buttons that are uncomfortable. And can I just ask you about, while we're on this, can I just ask you about this? This has been something that's bothering me. So back when I was at Fox, and then later NBC, I was very supportive of trans people. At Fox, I was upset when Keith Abloh said Chaz Bono should not be dancing in Dancing with the Stars. You know, Chaz is a biological girl who transitioned to male and was featured on Dancing with it. And I was like, you know what? There's so much hate. Let's try to be supportive. Then I went to NBC and I featured some transgender people and talked about their lives and how they found love and how it was helpful to them. And even on this show, we talked about kids. And out of respect for the one mother who entrusted me with the interview of her child, I've never gone back and played the soundbite, and I won't because I loved their family. But it was a boy who said that he was a girl, and she was convinced that it was real. And there is such a thing as gender dysphoria, and it typically affects very young boys, and typically not as much females. And I don't know whether this kid was in fact going through it, but we talked about it in a way that was accepting and loving. And it's not that I'm against talking about things in a way that's accepting and loving, but ever since, since we've lost our minds on this subject, so that was 17, and here we are, almost 6 years later. I feel very differently about it. And I feel like it's transitioned from being supportive of the very small group of people who actually have gender dysphoria into widespread, massive medical abuse of hurting children who are hurting for different reasons, in service of a political or ideological agenda. You know what I mean? And I've really wrestled with, how did we go from trying to teach kindness and love and acceptance and support of people who legitimately are suffering with something, to the widespread abuse of masses of American children? I'd love to get you both to weigh in on that. Chrissy, I'll start with you.
You cut out there, Megyn. Did you say me?
Yeah, Chrissy, let's start with you.
Yeah, I just went on a rant about this the other day. I think that the politicization of this is actually activists failing the constituents they're supposed to be supporting. They're supposed to be supporting legitimately trans people, yet they go out and support people like the biological man with a penis at the YMCA who is exposing himself. I believe it was Dr. Deborah So that so aptly put it that if you have real gender dysphoria, you are not leaving your part hanging out, okay? You are covering it up and you are partaking in the actual gender dysphoria that you feel. And that would be, you don't want people to know that you are a biological man. The problem is that activists then go and stick up for people who use their pedophilic mindset in the name of LGBTQ alphabet soup. And that's the problem that we have. The activist communities, if they stood up for real transgender people, then this love and acceptance would be painted people would be totally fine with it. But the problem is that when people hijack the transgender movement, that's how we get where we are today. And that's exactly what's happening. There's more people hijacking it than real people going through it.
That trans woman later came out and claimed that they had transition surgery. We don't know whether it's true because we know as of December 2021, it hadn't happened. But in any event, the point remains the same: is it's a biological man in the women's room, and the woman could tell, the 17-year-old girl, whatever's been done, she could tell that it was a biological man. What do you think of it, Chloe? It's like I don't know any longer, how to be kind and supportive of people who legitimately are suffering with this disorder, this misguided belief that they've been born into the wrong body, and those who are just being shoved like you are into this group that don't belong there, and trying to push back against that.
Yeah, I think the motivations in pushing this are, like Chrissy said, due in part to ideology and politics, but I think a big part of it is also money, especially here in the US. I'm sure you guys know, Europe is starting to slow down with these procedures, especially in children. But the US is just not stopping anytime soon. And I think that's due in part because the US, in a lot of ways, is motivated more by money. And I think it's also just harder to stop here because we're such a big country. And just because of the way our country is run.
That's right. Well, because of federalism, we have states that are going to be more blue and states that are going to be more red. And the red states are pumping the brakes on this and the blue states are full steam ahead. And it's become like a principle for them. A principle. They've forgotten what core principles ought to be in medicine. Do no harm. That's number one. Let me pause for 1 minute. There's a lot more to get into. And we'll talk about the detransitioning when we come back with Chloe and also Chrissy of the Daily Caller. What an interesting discussion. So glad you guys are both here. Stand by. So, Chrissy, in the documentary, you feature, as I mentioned, 4 other detransitioners. Kat Cattinson, she's a woman who transitioned to male, then back to female, talked about how her parents did not affirm her. They did not affirm. And how at the time that was very traumatic for her, but now she is grateful. So to all the parents out there just being guilted for refusing to affirm, you've got the 88% statistic from Dr. Leonard Sachs. It's longitudinal studies that they've done, saying they will go back to biological sex if you leave them alone. And then you've got, Kat saying, I appreciate now my parents not affirming me. And you take a deep dive, hence the title of the film, Damaged, into what happens, these medical procedures that we do so willy-nilly. And then for the poor detransitioners, they're stuck with a lot of these results forever, even though they just want to default back to their biological sex. One of those is Abel Garcia, who seems like such a sweet, good guy. And he talks about he's a biological guy who transitioned to female for a while and then realized didn't want any part of that, and talked openly about what he's now dealing with, and that's SOT4.
Obviously, I have genital atrophy. For those who don't know what that means, it just means all my genitals are much smaller. So it makes it really hard to use the restroom. I don't know if I'm fertile still. Memory fog, brain fog. Obviously, it's probably due to all the hormones I've taken.
Chrissy, it can be a very rough road once you've crossed over.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Looking back on these, we filmed these like 2 months ago. It just breaks my heart all over again. I just feel for these kids so bad. I'm calling them kids. Abel and I are like the same age. He's like 25 too. But we were talking about this at his place and going into their homes and seeing how difficult it is to just do kind of the everyday, day-to-day things when your life is so derailed. And like you said, Kat, her parents weren't affirming. Abel's parents weren't necessarily affirming as well. And that played a big role in really pushing him over the edge, actually. But every child comes back to say, I'm very grateful for my parent who said no. We were just talking early in this interview about cell phones. Like I said, I'm 25. I come around to it. I was so mad when I was 17 years old and my mom was stalking my phone. But gosh, I am so thankful for it now because I don't have some of those issues. I don't have the gender dysphoria. I don't have the body dysphoria because my mom said, absolutely not. We are not giving you those things. There's no need for those things. And, of course, your child is mad at you at the time. But gosh, they come around. I know we've come around. I know Kat's come around. I know Abel's come around. Chloe, I'm sure you could speak to it, how thankful you would have been if someone would have said no to you. And that's why we say no to affirmation right off the bat. So I agree. I'm with you, Megyn. Just parents should continue saying no. The kids will come back.
You have to be the parent. Sometimes it's tough. And Abel's story, it's not like he transitioned just because his parents said, no, you're a boy. There's a whole story in the documentary about the dad taking him to a prostitute and it was like, bad. Okay, this is not the way. But you can not affirm in a loving way too. Dr. Sachs called it watchful waiting. Watchful waiting, 9 times out of 10, is going to inure to the benefit of the parents and the child, right? It's going to work out the way it ought to. But Chloe, you talked about so you wind up going on the cross-gender hormones. And then how old were you when you got your double mastectomy?
I was 15. It happened just after my sophomore year ended.
I mean, sitting here now, can you believe that there was a doctor who willingly performed that on you at age 15?
No, frankly, even as somebody went through it, I just can't believe the point we've gotten to.
Right. Neither can I. It's so obviously wrong. And there's a very moving clip. Forgive me, I know I have you here, but I want to play the clip from the film where you talk about sitting in a psychology class and realizing what you'd done to yourself. This is SOT 3.
They grafted my nipples, and there's been like some
pretty serious complications arising from that. So I started taking a class on psychology and child development. And I had a lesson about maternal bonding. And that was the first time that I really thought about being a parent and what that might look like for me. And there was kind of a big emphasis on breastfeeding, not only as the means of feeding your child, but it's also one of the ways that mothers bond with their children. And after finding this out, I felt like a monster. I felt like I took something away from my future children, and that I knew I would never be able to get that back, and it shook me.
My God, you poor thing. This should not have happened to you. I mean, what was it from that point forward, the detransitioning, or what made you resolve, I don't want to do this anymore?
That was the biggest thing that eventually led to me detransitioning. About a few weeks later, I decided I couldn't keep doing this, and I stopped doing the testosterone shots. I started putting away all my boy clothes and growing out my hair. I couldn't do it anymore.
I heard you use the word ashamed, that you felt ashamed when you wanted to go back to your biological sex. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that started before I started detransitioning, actually. After I got the surgery, I realized that I wanted to dress like a girl again and present femininely, and that I didn't like the way that testosterone made me look or sound. I had a very deep voice. It was a lot deeper than it is now, and I hated it. I hated all of it. It was really hard for me to really pinpoint where the issue was, because I thought for so long that transition was benefiting me, and now everybody knew me as Leo. They knew me as their son, their brother. Everybody knew me as a boy now, and I didn't think there was any way of going back. And I would wear some of my older girl clothes in private, and sometimes buy makeup from the drugstore. And I would wear all that in private, and I started to resent myself for it. I was really ashamed of myself. It was shameful to admit that I was wrong.
Wow. To the point that Chrissy raised earlier, after the double mastectomy, which is not a small surgery, they dismiss it as, oh, just top surgery, like it's a nothing. It's not nothing. You started to have some complications. And were the doctors who were so supportive of your transition there for you the way they were prior to the surgery?
No, the complications that I'm facing now started to pop up about 2 years after the surgery, actually. Last year, I reached out to my surgeon to report that not only that I had regretted my mastectomy, but also that I was having complications from it a few years after. And I have to wear bandages over my chest every day because of it. And my surgeon, I mean, all I could really get with him was about a 5-minute call over Zoom. And the whole time it felt like he was being very dismissive, disrespectful even. And his advice was just keep covering it with bandages and put some Vaseline over it. And it didn't make sense to me. It was like, I don't see why I need to do that, but maybe it might help. But when I did it, it actually gave me a skin infection. And that was the last time I trusted anybody on the team that helped me to transition.
I know now you've retained Harmeet Dillon, we love her, to help you in a legal battle against these doctors. Is it all of them? The surgeon, the person who affirmed it, they're all going to be challenged now on this quick draw affirmation of a minor.
Yes. The surgeon, the gender specialist who referred me to the surgeon, and the endocrinologist who put me on hormones, as well as the hospital that I got surgery at, and Kaiser, my healthcare provider as a whole.
Good. And what are you trying to prove with the lawsuit? What's satisfaction to you there?
I want to get justice for what happened to me, and I want to scare off other doctors from doing this to children, and to create a precedent for other kids and other young people, and just other people in general who are going through the same thing to be able to do the same for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Chrissy, this is so necessary because, I mean, look what California's doing now. As you have some states here looking more like those Nordic countries that are slowing this down. And you got states like Texas or Georgia saying, well, you know what, we might want to pause too. This is getting a little aggressive with our children. And you got California being like, we'll be the sanctuary. Send all of your kids here. We'll do all of the gender surgeries here. I mean, the only way to stop this is through lawsuits, through the law.
Absolutely. I mean, I live in Nashville. We underwent all of that with the Vanderbilt clinic as well. It needs to be stopped. And that is really the only way that goes about it. But, Megyn, I was just reading a really great article over the weekend about how it's really not just doctors that are pushing this, or the hormone, organizations, big pharma, that are pushing this as well. There are the Association for, I believe it's Plastic Surgeons, ASPC. They are actively pushing right now to lobby against all these bans that stop transgender minors from getting surgeries because they want the money. And time again, these transgender activists, it goes back to my original point I made earlier, that these transgender activists, they should be saying, no, we want these surgeries to be done for people in a healthy, safe way. But the plastic surgeons are just looking to make money at these hospitals, and they're profiting off of young kids who are entrusting them with their health. And then when something goes wrong, like what happened with Chloe, they're nowhere to be found.
That was on the Vanderbilt tapes that Matt Walsh got his hands on, where the head of the program was saying, you know how much money we make off this? This is great.
Yeah.
Like, she was talking about not the tender ages that they were doing these surgeries on, but how much money it would add to Vanderbilt's bottom line. And then publicly they deny that they do that they're worried about money, or that usually they say they don't operate on minors.
Right. Well, that's what Mount Sinai says. They said they don't operate on minors. And then we got Dr. Safer on tape saying he's done it on 17-year-olds. That's a minor.
So Chloe, what happened with your parents? Were they relieved that you wanted to go back to your biological sex, or were they, how did that go?
I mean, they felt a lot of guilt because they feel like they played a large role in this. I mean, obviously they had to sign off on all of this, and personally, I don't blame them one bit, because they too were lied to. And their hand was forced in this. They were told that I was going to kill myself.
It's so hard for parents being told by all the authorities that this is the right move. What do you think today? There's a big debate. Should we use people's pronouns? Even the other night, I mentioned that online pornography seminar that I went to via Zoom for our school. And they're talking about kids, there's boys and girls, and they're talking about, well, cis boys and girls are this. And I was like, 99% of all boys and girls out there are cis, meaning their gender identity aligns with their biological sex. You don't need to say cis. You don't need, stop it. Stop throwing it out there at every turn. Like, gender's just this thing. You can, it's just stop it. It bothers me, I have to say, although I will say somebody's pronoun of choice unless it's they, which that one's taken. It's too confusing. But where do you land on that, Chloe, and the pronoun thing?
I mean, personally, I will use somebody's preferred pronouns as long as they're not disrespectful. Like they treat me the way that they want to be treated. As for how I feel about this whole thing, I don't believe in a trans child, or I don't believe in, a lot of people use the phrase real transgender to describe people who experience dysphoria. I don't really believe in that, but I mean, I know that dysphoria is a very real thing, but I think that if an adult is fully informed, they should be able to make the choice to transition if nothing else has worked. But I don't think children should be allowed to do this at all. It is never appropriate for kids.
And Chrissy, how many detransitioners do you think are out there?
Well, we have a Reddit group that has 46,000 people, and I can only imagine that that's just half maybe of the population. Walt, who is again one of our subjects, has an organization called sexchangeregret.com, and he says he is constantly bombarded with individuals who are regretting, in the process of regretting, in the process of detransitioning. They are constantly coming to him. His inbox is flooded, and he has to work slowly to help every individual who goes through this. It's unknown, and the sad part is just like with COVID and America refusing to do any studies on this, the US and Big Pharma here refuses to do any studies on this issue, on detransitioning, on the effects of cross-sex hormones, et cetera. We know very little.
Yeah. Thanks to you, we know a little bit more. But I know Chloe's now formed a group helping kids who are going through this. Good for you, Chloe. Good luck on your lawsuit. And Chrissy, thanks so much for helping to shine a light. You can watch Damaged, the Trans of America's Kids on the Daily Caller this Wednesday. Go to dailycaller.com to check it out. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow when our friends from the Fifth Column join us with a preview of the State of the Union. Hey, before we go, happy birthday, Cardinal Dolan.